Good to see you. And September, as you know, is so crucial. The peak of hurricane season, September 10th, and that's the average here. And things are really ramping up, as you know, in the Atlantic Basin.
That's it. Enough. We're not going to have any more cars driving through this water because it takes 6 inches to reach the bottom of most passenger vehicles. Once you get up to a foot of water, at that point, that can float some vehicles. Once you get up to 2 feet, that can start to sweep vehicles away, and we don't want that to happen.
How about a whistle? If a tree falls on your roof and it caves in, you're yelling for help, you lose your voice, you have a whistle to draw attention to yourself.
We wouldn't have even thought of that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, exactly.
I am in Barrow, Alaska. It is the northernmost city in the United States. Behind me is the Arctic Ocean. And yeah, it is really cold here. Temperatures are only in the 30s and we have a brisk wind. No! Ah! Oh my God! Oh no! I got my jeans wet! It's so cold! Why did I do that?
Level 4 wind restriction on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, which connects the south side to the eastern shore. That is open, but only for smaller vehicles. No tractor trailers, no motorcycles. And honestly, I wouldn't want to drive anything over that right now because we have hurricane warnings just as you go out into the Atlantic Ocean.
Well, keep in mind, for any type of disaster that you may be prone to, there is a basic kit that will have all the items that will work in any emergency situation.
And there's actually a lot of weather criteria that has to be met for this GOES-R weather satellite to launch into space.
Some areas could get isolated amounts of 30, even 40 inches of rain.
Chilly 16 degrees right now here in Punxsutawney. So you wanted to be twinning with me here at the gift shop in Punxsutawney. He did not see his shadow. So everybody here is so excited because that means an early spring.
Thankfully, everybody is okay. They have a really good attitude about this. 81 degrees in Birmingham. Our winds are going to be the key player for tomorrow. They're going to turn into the south and southwest, and that's going to bring these warmer temperatures right back up into Hampton Roads. At the same time, no precipitation to worry about. High pressure is right on top of us.
The countdown clock is right behind me, and the weather is looking phenomenal for the launch tomorrow. The forecast is mostly sunny skies with a high of 80 degrees. A little bit breezy today, and there's actually a lot of weather criteria that has to be met for this GOES-R weather satellite to launch into space. They look at the wind speed, winds aloft. They look at clouds, moisture. There can't be any lightning around. There's a lot of criteria that have to be met, but it's not just weather. There's a lot of technical criteria as well. And I spoke with Pam Sullivan, the GOES-R flight project manager, about that. GOES-R will weigh, with the rocket, 1.2 million pounds at liftoff. So that's a lot of weight that's going to be launched into space tomorrow at 5:42 p.m. here at Kennedy Space Center. But what happens after the launch? Well, I want to talk more about that, and I'm going to bring in now Harris Corporation's Vice President, Rami Olaisen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Yes, and tell me first, what is Harris's role in the GOES-R launch?
Proud to do so. Harris Corporation is very excited. We have both the prime contract for the Advanced Baseline Imager. That's that next generation weather imager that's going to bring all this incredible weather to all of us. We're also the prime contractor for the ground system that's got to process that. So if you think about all of this quantity of data coming at us 5 times faster, you got to be able to handle it, to give it to the broadcast meteorologist and the National Weather Service to do what we're here to do, is to help protect lives and property. So we're very excited.
Absolutely, and that's amazing what you're able to do with all of that. So after launch tomorrow, after liftoff, what happens to the GOES-R weather satellite? What's the process from there?
Oh, it's going to be quite a process. We have a lot of engineers that are up with NOAA's operators in their Suitland operations facility. The first order of business is actually getting that spacecraft into its final orbit. So a lot of people don't appreciate that the ground system, in addition to processing all the information, actually flies that spacecraft. So you have to tell it where to go. You're basically commanding it from afar. So we'll be putting it up into its final orbit, and then what NOAA will do is a set of processes to just calibrate, make sure that it's ready to start sending data. A lot of antennas on that satellite that have to be opened and get ready for transmission. We expect that NOAA is going to start making data available probably in the late January, early February timeline, and then it'll gradually roll out more of the capability. So like any system, you want to bring it up one step at a time, and that's exactly what we're going to do, is prudently and methodically bring that capability online for our nation.
Oh my goodness. So when do you think GOES-R, it'll be GOES 16 by then, once it's in orbit, will be fully operational and we'll start getting this next generation data?
It won't be later than a year. Again, we're going to roll out the capabilities. One of the first things that's going to happen is we're going to start to see cloud moisture imagery. That's going to be the first image, and then after that, it's just going to keep rolling.
All right. Thank you so much, Rami, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Super excited here about the GOES-R launch, 5:42 p.m. I have a front row seat tomorrow. You can watch the launch live on NASA TV as well. April, Caleb, back to you.
All right, Cheryl, we miss you. Come back, girl.
Oh, I miss you too. I'll see you soon.
To Cheryl Nelson this morning. Cheryl, you've been with us all morning long, and one of the key things that you've been talking about is that tide cycle and how this morning at low tide, it was actually functioning more as a high tide, and conditions are only getting worse.
Mm-hmm. Laura, that's so true. I mean, the winds are whipping behind me right now. We still have some light rain as well, but we are starting to see that water rise starting. In fact, we have some video that we shot just a few minutes ago in Isle of Wight County, Virginia here. That's in the western part of Hampton Roads, so we're a little bit more inland, but people might not understand the tidal system here. This area floods so easily when the water levels are high. So we're showing you Jones Creek, and what's happening here is the water is coming in from the Atlantic into the bay, into the James River, and then into Jones Creek, and that is starting to come over the road and cover it. Now, that's only the beginning, okay? So what we're going to see as we push toward high tide here in Isle of Wight is around 5 o'clock this afternoon. That whole road will be covered in that spot. It will become impassable because we are seeing storm surge of 2 to 4 feet of water. There's going to be a lot of water there, and people are not going to be able to get around very easily at all this afternoon or this evening. They should be staying home. In fact, the winds are so bad here with the tropical storm force winds that we have here. That was a pretty big gust. We're gusting 40, 50 miles an hour here right now. We have a lot of bridges and tunnels in this area, and the tunnel right now connecting Norfolk and Portsmouth, called the Midtown Tunnel, that has been shut down. So when you start to see these things happening, you know it's a big deal. Also, level 4 wind restriction on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, which connects the south side to the eastern shore. That is open, but only for smaller vehicles. No tractor trailers, no motorcycles, and honestly, I wouldn't want to drive anything over that right now because we have hurricane warnings just as you go out into the Atlantic Ocean. It's not pretty here. Speaking of ocean, I want to pan over to what you can see. Guys, this is the James River, okay? We normally don't have white caps. It is not supposed to look like this. The river is angry right now, and I want you to focus on that second pier. If you can see the water, the waves, it is almost, the water's almost hitting that pier right there where their boat would normally be. And again, high tide is not occurring for another several hours. So we're seeing lots of waves, lots of wind. Rain is starting to back off here a little bit on the western part of Hampton Roads. But things are only going to get worse as we go throughout the afternoon, Laura.
Now, Cheryl, given that you have so much knowledge about this particular area, how much higher can that water go? And do you expect that second dock could potentially just go underwater here before we make it to high tide in a few hours?
That's a great question. So normally this area, when we get to about 4.5 feet at Sewell's Point on the James River, same river as this, but that's in Norfolk, that's when we start to see minor tidal flooding. Right now we're expecting it to get very close to 7 feet at high tide. So we're talking a few more feet. And if you add a few more feet to that dock, it's going to be pretty close there. So it's something that's going to be a major concern. And our friends down in the Outer Banks, I mean, God bless them. Their lives may be forever changed in Cape Hatteras.
Right, because they've had an extreme water level rise there as well. Cheryl, thank you so much.
Studies show that the Arctic is warming at a rate of 2 to 3 times faster than the rest of the Earth. Carbon is stored in permafrost beneath the tundra, and researchers aren't sure how fast that carbon may be released into the atmosphere. Studying how animals in the tundra may influence ecological processes underground may provide some insight.
We're specifically interested in how animals, specifically small herbivores, either exacerbate or mitigate the effects of climate change.
Even on cold, rainy days like today, there is a lot of research ongoing outside of Toolik Field Station on the Arctic tundra. But did you know that something as small as a vole could possibly play a role in climate change?
We're looking at voles and lemmings. They're ubiquitous in the Arctic, so they occur everywhere. They're also active year-round, so that means they don't hibernate, and underneath the snow, they're still working. They're eating plants, they're making waste, they're clipping leaves, they're making nests to sleep in. So they have a really big impact on the tundra.
With sites in 3 regions of the Arctic, this team is specifically interested in determining how these herbivores affect carbon pools and nutrients in the tundra. They have fencing enclosures to study their impacts on plants and soil, and have also set up several grids of live traps with peanut butter and birdseed to attract the small mammals. They use a capture-recapture technique to learn more about the herbivore's home range, density, and more.
We want to know what sex they are, because that matters in terms of their effect on the tundra. A female is going to reproduce and have babies, whereas a male, maybe not so much. So we sex them. We also take some samples from them. We'll take a hair and a fecal sample, so that way we can tell what they're eating.
What exactly small mammals are eating is important because they have a big impact on carbon and nutrient cycling.
A small mammal going about its day, it's going to clip some leaves. That's going to release nutrients back into the environment faster than if it wasn't there. It's also going to eat certain plants compared to other plants. And plants have different rates at which they either store or release carbon.
A recent study in Sweden looked at the tundra after a peak year of rodents and were able to measure the difference in plants from satellite images taken from space. This gives researchers here in northern Alaska reason to believe the effects in the Arctic may be just as great.
Depending on what happens with natural populations of rodents, we can have some predictive power on what their influence on carbon exchange is going to be.
From the Arctic tundra at Toolik Field Station in Alaska, I'm meteorologist Cheryl Nelson for AccuWeather.
Theirs is to be the biggest airborne invasion ever attempted to this time.
75 years ago, roughly 13,000 aircraft took to the skies over Western Europe on D-Day. Weather forecasting was in its infancy. No computer models, no satellite, no radar. Chief Meteorological Officer for the Allies, James Stagg, relied on experience and surface observations.
We owned the Atlantic. We had bases in Iceland, we had bases in Greenland, we had bases in northern Canada, and they could all submit weather reports.
These weather reports aided Allied meteorologists in making a weather forecast for the British Isles. The weather leading up to D-Day was stormy, and German forecasters, not having the same resources, believed the weather pattern wouldn't change for weeks. Allied meteorologists, though, saw a break in the weather coming, and D-Day was planned for June 5th.
The tide had to be low at first light, because we wanted all day to be fighting.
For a successful air attack, cloud cover had to be 60% or less, and ceilings couldn't be lower than 3,000 feet. Despite pushback from American meteorologists on the Allies team, the British forecaster Stagg convinced General Dwight D. Eisenhower to delay the invasion until June 6th, when he believed weather conditions would be optimal.
A lot was riding on the weather forecast on D-Day. I rode on this monoplane today, and even on a nice sunny day, there was turbulence. So can you imagine what those pilots felt 75 years ago?
So they're flying in the dark. They did hit some clouds. There was some stuff up there. The Germans are shooting at them very heavily, and airplanes are swerving all over the place.
They were flying us put us up at 1,500 feet. You know, it was dark. You couldn't see nothing outside.
And if that wasn't enough, the planes didn't have heat, and pilots only had fleece-lined flight jackets.
This was war, and you went out and you did it.
Although the weather during the initial hours of D-Day was not ideal with rough seas and lingering clouds,
The sky cleared as Stagg expected, making way for the largest aerial operation in history.
If Stagg was wrong, wow, it's revisionist history. I think it would have been slaughter. So give a lot of credit for the success of D-Day to a meteorologist.
For AccuWeather, I'm meteorologist Cheryl Nelson.